Sundays at my ranch used to be peaceful. The kind of peace that comes with wind rustling through the trees, the smell of smoked ribs in the air, and the low rumble of motorcycles pulling in over gravel. My friends and I weren't part of a gang, we were a riding crew. Some were veterans, a few retirees, and one guy even owned a bakery. We weren't loud. We weren't reckless. Just a bunch of folks who loved the open road and gathering under wide skies. That weekend, we had maybe 6 bikes lined up by the barn. Chrome shining, engines cooled, helmets hooked on handlebars. A few of the guys had brought their kids, and we were setting up for a small grill out by the pond. No alcohol, no noise, just burgers, guitars, and laughter. Then I saw the white SUV. It slowed as it passed the front of the property. I was tossing some steaks on the grill when I noticed it again, second lap. Slower this time. The window rolled down just enough for someone to peek out. I didn't wave, just watched. 15 minutes later, I saw her. Karen. Short blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand, she stood just outside the gate, pretending to take pictures of the road. But her phone was clearly aimed at us. I could practically hear her taking notes in her head. I walked over to the fence and asked if she needed anything. No, she said with a forced smile. Just monitoring unusual activity in the area. Unusual activity? This was my land. My friends. My cookout. I asked her politely to step off the property, but she just scoffed and muttered something about neighborhood standards. 10 minutes later, 2 sheriff cruisers rolled up. I kid you not, 2 patrol cars. Lights on. Sirens off, thank goodness. The officers got out, hands relaxed, clearly unsure why they were even there. One of them approached me. We got a call about possible gang activity and noise complaints. I raised my eyebrow and pointed toward the picnic table, where one of the bikers was showing a toddler how to roast marshmallows over a small fire pit. Gang activity? I asked. The other officer walked the perimeter and saw the bikes lined up neat as dominoes. No revving. No chaos. Just a quiet, casual gathering. I'm sorry, the first cop said. Honestly, this doesn't look like what we were told. You guys aren't doing anything wrong. I nodded. Appreciate you coming out, though. Can I ask who made the call? They exchanged glances. We're not allowed to say, but you probably already know. I looked past them, and sure enough, Karen's white SUV was parked 2 houses down. She sat in the driver's seat, phone still in hand, pretending not to look. The officers left without writing a single citation. One of them even complimented the way the bikes were parked. Tighter than a police motorcade, he said. But that moment? That wasn't just annoying. It was insulting. She called the cops on us because we had motorcycles. Because we didn't fit her image of how the area should look. She didn't care that it was my land. That we were peaceful. That we weren't bothering anyone. To her, bikes meant trouble. And in her world, trouble needed to be controlled. That night, my crew stuck around longer than usual. Not because of the call, but because they could see the look on my face. The kind of look that comes when someone crosses a line they shouldn't have. No one raised their voice. No one slammed anything or made threats. But one of the guys leaned over and said, "She called the cops on us for barbecuing? Maybe it's time we stop being so quiet." The idea wasn't revenge. It was respect. We weren't going to yell or cause problems. But we also weren't going to pretend it didn't happen. Karen wanted attention. She was about to get more than she bargained for. And this time, the bikes weren't just rolling in for lunch. 2 days after the cookout, a letter showed up in my mailbox. It wasn't from the county. Not from law enforcement. It was printed on the HOA's official letterhead. Notice of violation, excessive motorcycle presence, disruption of community aesthetic, unapproved gatherings. They listed the supposed offenses like it was some sort of criminal report. The number of motorcycles exceeding acceptable residential limits, potential intimidation of nearby residents, and unsanctioned events that were not pre-approved by the board. I nearly laughed. The HOA didn't have authority over my ranch. My property line was well outside their jurisdiction, and they knew it. But what really got me? The letter ended with a recommendation to limit my guests to no more than 2 vehicles per weekend, to maintain the peace and rural integrity of the neighborhood. 2 vehicles. On land I paid for, cleared, and maintained myself. I walked that letter straight to my buddy Marcus, who's not just part of my biker crew, he's also a property attorney. He took one glance at it, raised an eyebrow, and said, "They're bluffing. And badly." Marcus pulled up property maps, HOA boundaries, and county filings. Every single line proved what I already knew: my land wasn't part of the HOA. Not under their rules, not in their plans, not even a foot. He grinned and said, "They want to push you. You should push back. The smart way." That night, while sitting around a fire with a few of the guys, we came up with an idea. Not retaliation. Not noise. Just presence. Karen wanted to make a point with her phone calls and clipboard. Then we'd make a much better one, with chrome, leather, and smiles. We weren't a gang. We weren't outlaws. But we were visible. And we were proud. I sent a message to the group chat. "Next Saturday. Meet at my ranch at 9 a.m. Bring your best manners. And your cleanest bikes." Word traveled fast. Not just in our crew, but beyond. Friends of friends. Riders we'd met at veteran charity runs. Even a few guys from a firehouse group that rode on weekends. That morning, the sound of engines rolling in was like thunder in slow motion. 30 bikes. All polished. All lined up in perfect formation at the edge of my property. Not a single one crossed the HOA border. Not a tire out of line. But we were close enough to be seen. We weren't revving. We weren't speeding. We were just there. I could see her curtain twitch from across the field. Karen was watching. Probably already dialing someone. But this time, we didn't give her the opportunity to twist the story. We stayed peaceful. Some of the guys set up a table with coffee and donuts. Others started chatting with neighbors who had wandered over out of curiosity. Turns out, the fear Karen tried to spread wasn't sticking anymore. One man, probably in his 60s, walked up and asked, "What's this all about?" I told him, "We ride. We cook. We hang out. That's it." He looked over at the line of bikes, nodded, and said, "My brother used to ride. He'd have liked this." Even a few kids came by to take pictures with the bikes. Some of the crew helped them climb up and honk the horns. Laughter replaced the silence that used to follow any HOA patrol drive-by. But Karen didn't come outside. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just watched. And as we kept smiling and talking with the actual neighbors, the ones who lived here, it became clear that whatever power she thought she had, it was slipping away with every handshake, every chuckle, every cup of coffee we poured. We didn't have to say a word to her. Because the message was already loud and clear. This wasn't about motorcycles. It was about control. And control was something she no longer had. By Monday morning, it was like someone had flipped a switch in the neighborhood. People who had always avoided eye contact with me were now waving. A couple even stopped their cars to say things like, "Didn't know bikers could be that polite," or, "You handled that better than I ever could." Word had spread fast. Not about a protest or confrontation, but about how we showed up and didn't give anyone a reason to complain. Karen, on the other hand, had gone quiet, which was unusual. For someone who used to post daily HOA reminders in the community Facebook group about things like acceptable grass height or no visible trash cans on non-collection days, she had vanished. No posts. No replies. Not even a passive-aggressive emoji. But then came the surprise. Wednesday afternoon, a delivery guy pulled into my drive with a large envelope and a clipboard. "Certified delivery for the property owner," he said. Inside was a thick packet of documents. HOA bylaws, highlighted printouts of zoning codes, and a formal community concern statement. It was signed by Karen and 2 other board members. It claimed that my ranch activity compromised the tranquility and brand image of the HOA, and posed reputational risk due to the presence of organized motorcycle groups. Reputational risk? They were treating my cookout like a gang rally, and my friends like threats to their imaginary castle. But here's the catch. The statement wasn't a legal order. It wasn't even an official notice. It was basically a pile of fluff. No court stamp. No enforcement attached. Just words in bold fonts. I didn't even call Marcus this time. I knew exactly what they were trying to do. Pressure. See, Karen and her little board of mini-tyrants had always worked the same way. They didn't come at people directly. They used paper, silence, and fear. Quiet threats with just enough legal-sounding language to make you question yourself. To make you wonder if you were wrong, even when you weren't. But now that tactic wasn't working. I wasn't biting. So instead of fighting fire with fire, I did something better. I shared the document online. Just one post. Apparently, having cookouts with friends and motorcycles is now a threat to the HOA's reputation. Thoughts? The comments exploded. Neighbors who had never spoken out before suddenly had stories of their own. One said Karen sent them a violation for having a porch swing too brightly painted. Another shared how her daughter's lemonade stand was shut down because it was an unauthorized commercial enterprise. People were tired, and apparently they just needed someone to go first. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday evening. I had never attended one before, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to waste time listening to rulebooks being read aloud. But this time, I marked the date. I didn't walk in angry. I didn't walk in loud. I came in clean-shaven, wearing a denim jacket, with a copy of my land deed and a coffee in hand. The room was fuller than usual. Chairs were lined up wall to wall. I recognized at least a dozen people from the lake houses and nearby properties. They weren't board members. They were watchers. And they were watching her. Karen stood at the front, flipping nervously through her notes. When the meeting began, she opened with community concerns, pointing vaguely at outside activities causing discomfort among residents. I raised my hand. She paused. "This is a board-led discussion, sir." "I have the floor under community response," I said, holding up the HOA handbook, ironically, one she had written. The room got real quiet. "I'm not part of your HOA," I said, "but I live next to it. And lately, some of your members have confused neighbor with nuisance." Karen tried to interrupt, but a board member to her right raised a hand. "Let him finish." I continued. "I've never threatened anyone. I've never broken a law. What I've done is host cookouts. Let people ride bikes. And what you've done," I looked directly at Karen, "is call the cops, spread fear, and now send fake legal letters trying to intimidate me." No one clapped. No one shouted. Just silence. And sometimes, silence says more than applause ever could. By the time the next weekend rolled around, something in the air felt different. The ranch was still the same, quiet, open, full of sunlight, but the neighborhood didn't feel so tense anymore. People who used to avoid looking in my direction were now slowing down as they drove past. Some even rolled down their windows just to wave. A few brave ones stopped entirely to compliment the fence work, the garden, or just to say, "Hey." The funny part? My place hadn't changed at all. It was still the same dirt road, the same porch swing, and the same bikes lined up neatly beside the barn. What had changed was something less visible. People weren't afraid anymore. At least, not the ones who mattered. But that didn't mean Karen was done. I was outside early Saturday, just raking leaves and cleaning up near the front gate when I noticed her car parked further up the road than usual. She wasn't trying to hide this time. She stepped out in her usual way, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, strutting like she owned the ground she walked on. She stood just beyond my fence and started snapping photos again. Not just of the bikes this time, but of the lawn, the shed, even the grill. I leaned on my rake and asked, "Need a better angle? I can move the mower." She didn't say a word. Just turned and walked back to her car. An hour later, I got another envelope. No stamp. No postmark. Just folded paper dropped through the gate. The violation, this time? My outdoor grill setup was apparently a hazard and a non-permitted permanent fixture. Mind you, it was a regular barbecue grill. Bought at a hardware store. Sat on 4 wheels. I could push it back into the garage with one hand. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't targeting the bikes, or the noise, or even the people. She was targeting freedom. Every note, every complaint, every fake warning she mailed or dropped off. It was all about control. Because the moment someone wasn't following her version of order, she felt like she was losing her grip. But what she didn't understand was that control only works if people let it. That evening, I made a few phone calls. Not to lawyers. Not to the county. To my friends. They rolled in by sunset, engines soft, no revving, no showing off. Just respect. We didn't plan a party. We didn't post about it. We just grilled. Pulled out a few chairs and shared stories from long rides and past adventures. Someone brought ribs. Someone else brought peach cobbler. One guy even brought a portable projector and a sheet, and by the time it was dark, we were watching an old western under the stars. Then something strange happened. A car pulled up quietly across the road. Not Karen's. A different one. The driver stepped out. It was Mr. Howard, a long-time resident I'd seen around but never really talked to. He walked up slowly and said, "Mind if I come through?" "Not at all," I said, opening the gate. He looked around at the group and smiled. "This reminds me of how this neighborhood used to be." He stayed for over an hour. And by the end of it, he was laughing with a plate of brisket in one hand and a root beer in the other. I noticed a few other neighbors stepping out on their porches too. Not coming over, yet, but watching. Curious. Maybe even jealous they weren't part of it. This wasn't about bikes anymore. It was about the energy. The community. The way we all sat together and nobody had to look over their shoulder for a clipboard or a petty rule. Karen may have tried to call that chaos. But to us, it felt like home. And as the fire crackled and the projector flickered under the stars, I knew something in this neighborhood had shifted. Something big. And it wasn't going back. By the next week, my phone was buzzing with messages I never expected to get. People I barely knew from the neighborhood were suddenly asking if they could stop by the ranch sometime. Not to complain, just to check things out, maybe have a coffee or see the bikes. One guy even asked if he could bring his teenage son to learn how to ride. I didn't mind. Actually, I liked it. After everything Karen tried to do, twisting the truth, using fear to push people around, folks were finally seeing who we really were. It wasn't about leather jackets and roaring engines. It was about being free, being kind, and treating people like neighbors, not enemies. But while the neighborhood vibe was changing, Karen wasn't done. Not even close. She started leaving little printed notices around again. Only this time, she wasn't mailing them. She was putting them up on street poles, pinning them to community boards at the gas station, even slipping them under windshields. Unauthorized gatherings. Suspicious group activity. Concerns of property devaluation due to non-residents loitering. I found one of her flyers stuck in my own front gate. It didn't have my name on it, but it didn't have to. The message was clear. She was trying to rally fear again. And the worst part? She was trying to make people afraid of my friends. She picked the wrong crew. That weekend, we had another get-together. Nothing flashy. Just a cookout. A few more bikes than usual showed up. A few more lawn chairs. This time, I noticed people walking up from the edge of the road, neighbors who'd never come over before. One family brought a pie. Another brought lemonade. That's when Jax, one of the newer guys in our group, walked over and whispered something to me. "You know," he said, "we should stop calling this a cookout." I laughed. "What do you want to call it?" He grinned. "A community barbecue." And just like that, the idea was born. I printed out a few signs and pinned them around town. Not flashy, just clean and simple. Free barbecue Saturday, open to all, good food, good people, good vibes. No rules. No RSVPs. No hidden agenda. Just food, fun, and the freedom to show up without judgment. By noon, the ranch was alive. Smoke from the grill drifted over the field. Tables were filled with homemade sides. Kids were running near the pond. An older couple sat near the tree line holding hands and smiling like they hadn't done that in years. And then it happened. 3 of the HOA board members showed up. Not to argue. Not to shut anything down. They came with their own folding chairs and a big tub of baked beans. I was stunned for a second. But I walked over, shook hands, and welcomed them in like anyone else. We didn't talk about Karen. We didn't talk about violations or rules or who belonged where. We just shared food. And somewhere in the middle of it all, someone pointed out that Karen's curtains were drawn again. She was watching, no doubt. But she wasn't part of it. That said everything. People weren't listening to her flyers anymore. They weren't buying into the fear or the drama. They were showing up for ribs, corn on the cob, and real conversations. At one point, a kid with ice cream on his chin ran up and asked if he could sit on one of the bikes. The crew said yes without hesitation. That boy's face lit up like it was Christmas morning. His mom took a picture, then asked if it was okay to post it online. And that's when I realized, Karen could print 100 more flyers. She could write letters, call the sheriff, complain to the sky. But the neighborhood wasn't with her anymore. They were here, by the fire pit, around the grill, sharing stories with people they used to fear. And nothing on paper could erase what was happening right in front of them. That next morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just steady, like someone trying hard to seem polite. I opened it to find a man in a neatly pressed polo and khakis, holding a clipboard. He looked nervous, shifting on his feet like he wasn't sure what to say first. "Hi, sir. I'm with the HOA," he started, eyes darting to the bikes lined up beside the barn. I waited. "We've had ongoing concerns about your property," he continued. "There's been talk of noise complaints, vehicle volume, gatherings without board notice." I cut him off with a small smile. "You mean the cookouts?" He cleared his throat. "Right. The gatherings." I invited him to sit on the porch. He hesitated but eventually took a seat, clutching his clipboard like a shield. He said his name was Derek. Apparently, he was the newest board member, and it showed. He admitted that Karen had pressured the board into taking action against me, even though I wasn't technically under their authority. Technically. That word again. Derek seemed like a decent guy, just caught in the crossfire. He didn't have the same entitled air Karen carried. In fact, he seemed embarrassed to even be there. He told me the board had been split lately. Some members believed Karen had overstepped. Others were still afraid of upsetting her. "She's losing influence," he said quietly. "But she's not letting go." I leaned back, watching the sun break through the morning clouds. "I'm not looking to fight anyone," I said. "But I'm not rolling over either." He nodded. Then he surprised me. "I think what you're doing is good for this place," he said. "People are finally talking again. Getting outside. You've brought more community in 1 month than this HOA has in 5 years." I didn't say anything at first. Just let that sink in. Then he handed me a folder. "This is everything Karen's filed about you so far. Letters. Complaints. Copies of emails she sent to the sheriff, even some attempts to report your crew to the county as a motorcycle nuisance." I flipped through it. She'd even included blurry pictures of license plates, timestamps of when the bikes came and went, and one handwritten note accusing me of running an underground biker syndicate. "It would have been funny if it weren't so petty. I probably shouldn't be showing you this," Derek added. "But I thought you deserved to see what you're up against." I thanked him. He left quietly, no promises made, but I could tell something in him had shifted. He'd seen the truth up close. The food, the families, the laughter. Not noise, connection. Later that evening, I brought the folder to our usual fire pit hangout. My crew didn't need to see it, but I showed them anyway. Just so they understood how far Karen was willing to go. Nobody got angry. Nobody talked revenge. They just shook their heads. "She's scared," one of the guys said. "Not of us. Of change." And he was right. Karen had ruled through silence for so long that now, when people were finally coming together without her approval, she didn't know how to react. Control had been her comfort blanket. And we'd pulled it off in one afternoon with ribs and rock music. Still, that folder didn't sit right with me. Not because it intimidated me, but because it showed how far someone could twist things when they felt threatened by community, by freedom, by simple human connection. So I did what I do best. I grilled. The next day, the crew rolled in early. Not with engines blaring, just calm, steady arrivals. This time, we weren't just hosting friends. We invited families. Seniors. Local vets. Even a few deputies who had heard about the whole ordeal and wanted to see the magic for themselves. One of them laughed when he saw the setup. "This looks more like a church picnic than a biker gang meeting." Exactly. The HOA wanted a reason to label us a problem. But all we gave them was peace, burgers, and community spirit. No rules were broken. No threats were made. And yet, the message was louder than anything a revving engine could deliver. We weren't backing down. We were just getting started. The following Saturday started out calm, almost too calm. I was up early, walking the property line, coffee in hand, just checking everything over. The pond was still, the sky was clear, and I could already hear the distant hum of motorcycles in the distance, not loud, just enough to know the crew was on the move. But something was off. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't the bikes. It was the silence coming from the other side of the neighborhood. No HA emails. No surprise visits. No Karen peeking out from behind her curtains. I wasn't sure if it was a trap or a truce. But I wasn't about to cancel our plans. This Saturday was going to be our biggest one yet. A full-on open invitation. Posters went up during the week at the post office, the diner, even the church bulletin board. Community barbecue, all are welcome, good food, no drama. By noon, the smell of grilled ribs and pulled pork had already started pulling in guests. Families, teenagers, older couples, even some of the newer residents who had just moved into the HOA development. They came with wide eyes and cautious smiles, like they were waiting to be judged. But they weren't. One guy in his 30s walked up wearing khakis and a golf shirt. He looked around at the bikers, the smokers, the hay bales used for makeshift seating and asked, is this a private event? "Only if you're allergic to potato salad," I said. "Grab a plate." He laughed, shook my hand and joined the line. Before long, the place looked like a county fair. Kids were throwing beanbags at cornhole boards. One of the crew brought a portable speaker and started playing old-school rock and blues. The bikes were lined up like a museum display, people taking pictures, asking questions, even sitting on a few with permission. That's when the drone appeared. It buzzed overhead, dipping lower than necessary, hovering right over the grill area and then moving toward the parked bikes. A few people looked up, pointing. I didn't need to guess where it came from. Karen. She was too predictable. If she couldn't stop us in person, she'd spy from the sky. Someone suggested throwing something at it, but I waved them off. Let it record. Maybe she'll learn how a real community behaves. It hovered for a few more minutes, then zipped back toward the HOA side like a nervous bird. And just as I was thinking things couldn't get weirder, a black SUV pulled up near the front gate. Out stepped 2 county code enforcement officers. I could feel the tension rise instantly. Conversations slowed. Music dropped. People turned their heads. One of them approached me, clipboard in hand, the other recording on a small body cam. "Afternoon," the first officer said. "We've received a formal complaint about unauthorized food service and unlicensed public gathering." I kept my voice calm. "Private cookout. No money exchanged. No sales. No advertising beyond local flyers inviting neighbors." He nodded. "Do you mind if we take a look around?" "Be my guest," I said, motioning with my cup. They walked through the area, took photos, asked a few polite questions, and then stopped by the grill. That's where things shifted. One of the officers took a deep breath, looked at the brisket, and said, "Smells amazing, by the way." That broke the ice. Someone handed him a plate. The other officer laughed and said, "If we write up a report, it'll just say, 'Best brisket we've ever had on duty.'" Everyone relaxed. Turns out they'd been sent by, you guessed it, Karen. They didn't say her name, but we all knew. And just like the sheriff before them, they left with full bellies and 0 violations. The rest of the day was smooth. No more drones. No more clipboards. Just firewood cracking, forks scraping plates, and the sound of neighbors actually enjoying being neighbors. By sunset, even a few folks from inside the HOA brought over desserts. One family showed up with homemade cobbler, said they were tired of all the tension, and just wanted to feel welcome somewhere again. They were. Instantly. And as the last of the smoke curled into the sky and the porch lights flickered on, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever Karen had tried to build with fear, it was falling apart. Because nothing, No rulebook, no drone, no fake violation, could compete with the power of grilled ribs, open doors, and people finally realizing they didn't need permission to be part of a community.